Hey guys, Mr. Enyart here. Today we're going to be doing lesson 18 from module 4, grade 6 Eureka Math. We're going to be talking about writing and evaluating addition and subtraction sentences from word problems. So basically using math as a language to use common sense in solving everyday problems. Hopefully this will be helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to comment at the bottom. Let's go.
Mr. Enyart is here to help. Let's go!
So the lesson starts out with some review of previous lessons. How can we show a number increased by 2? So obviously language we need to understand is the word increased means to get bigger. And increased is usually an addition, unless it's increased by equal groups, which it's not. So we have an unknown number. I'm just going to call it n. And we want it to increase by 2. That's pretty much it. So if we have an amount here, and we'll call it n, and then we want it to improve or increase by 2, what would that be? And obviously we can't solve it, but we would be taking the n amount, which is this part of the model, and then this 2 amount, and we would be combining it, and that's why we get the plus. So as it goes down, it's very important that we use units of measure to explain something. We need to know what it stands for, not just that J stands for his speed, but what are we measuring his speed in? Is that his speed in miles per hour? Is he driving? Is that his speed in meters per hour? Maybe he's running. Is that his, what is his units? What are we talking about? We need to be very specific as to what we are measuring, and we want to always make sure that's included in our description because, again, language needs to be concise and specific. So instead of just saying that Joshua's speed is representative of J represents the speed, notice it says this is an incomplete description. How can we complete that? Well, we need to add units of measurement. So we might say something like, let Josh's speed, or J, represent his speed in meters per second. So now we know that J not only represents Josh's speed, but we know that his speed is measured in meters per second. So let's look at Rufus's height. How can we describe Rufus's height? Well, what's a common measurement for measuring height? All right, so now how can we take that and rewrite this description with units? Okay, so we might write something like, so we could say something like, let R represent Rufus's height in centimeters. We could say feet. We could say meters if he's super tall. I don't know. Maybe he's a giant. But we need to have a unit. So our unit here is centimeters. Our units for speed need to be rates, so something per something else, meters per second. So why don't you try milk sold? So it represents how much milk is sold. What kind of units would you use to measure the milk sold? What kind of units would you measure a time in the 40-meter hurdles? And what units would you measure age in? Okay, so we could say the following things. So how do we usually measure milk, right? We usually measure milk in gallons because we buy it by the gallon. So it would make sense to use gallons as our unit to represent how much milk is sold. How would you measure time for running a 40-meter hurdle? Now, 40-meter hurdles is a pretty short race. It doesn't take a lot of time, so I would use a measurement of time that is quick, like seconds. So C would represent her time in seconds would be our unit. And then how do we measure age? We usually use years. So you can see that with each of these, there's some common sense, there's some visualization, some thinking. How do I usually measure speed of a person? How do I usually measure height of a person? Now, centimeters may not be typical in the USA, but most of the world using the metric system, and centimeters is a typical way to measure height so that you don't also have feet and inches. You wouldn't have meters and centimeters. You could just use one number that would represent centimeters. And obviously, liquids are sold by specific amounts, milk typically in gallons, and then quick races in seconds, and age in years. So you have to balance, don't think of it just as math. Think of it as common sense. So I'm not going to spend time on this one. I want you to try and do it. How would you represent CDs? Obviously, the number that she has would be a complete description, but how would you describe his merit badges? So, and then trading cards and money. You can see what they did is it represents the number of CDs Carolyn has. And it's so important to be specific. So are these merit badges that he bought? Are these merit badges that he earned? Are these merit badges that somebody just gave him for fun, that he found on the ground? Are these trading cards that he has bought from the store? Are these trading cards that he's gotten from other friends? Are these trading cards in all, just total, like every trading card he's had since birth, no matter how he got it? And then money, obviously. How do you describe money? It's not just money. It's money in what? Are we in Europe talking about euros? Or are we in Mexico talking about pesos? Are we in America talking about dollars and cents? We need to be specific with our units. So what would you write there? And I'm just going to move on down to this fun thing. So I love stuff like this where we start off with a story problem. This is real life. This is word problems, common sense, being used through visualization and reading skills. As you read it, think how you would solve it, and then see what the rest of this, how this makes sense. So I'm just going to think out loud as I go through this, and then fill this one out for you, and then I'll have you do the rest by yourself. So, story problem. Greg has $2 more than his brother Jeff. Write an expression for the amount of money Greg has. So I'm thinking, I don't know how much money Greg has, right? I just know it's $2 more than Jeff. And I don't know how much money Jeff has. So I'm going to be using something that I know, in this case, Jeff, whatever his amount is, even though I don't know the actual amount, I can use a variable to take place of that because he obviously has a set amount of money. So I'm going to start with J representing Jeff's money in dollars right here. Okay, so J. How much does Jeff have? I don't know, it's just J. But whatever he has, I know Greg has $2 more than him. What does that mean? It means he has whatever Jeff's is plus 2. This equation, this expression, would give me the total amount of Greg's money. So if Jeff had $12, so now we can evaluate. Now we know what J is. J is 12. How much money would Greg have? Well, since Jeff's money plus $2 gives me Greg's money, and Jeff's is 12, if I take the 12 and I add 2, I get 14. Therefore, Greg must have $14. So you can read this one, pause the video, see if that one makes sense. Sometimes it helps to have more examples. I'm going to fill this one out. All right, so Abby reads 8 more books than Kristen in the first marking period. Write an expression for the number of books Abby read. Now, we don't know Abby and we don't know Kristen, but we know that there's a set amount here for Kristen and that Abby's is 8 more than that. So what I'm going to start with is writing out what I want my variables to represent. I just want to be clear and concise about this. So I'm going to let K represent, sorry about the handwriting, Kristen's books read. Okay, and so I guess that would just be in total books, how many books she's read. Books read in, I'm going to have to stretch it out here, in the first, I want to be specific, marking. Got to be honest. Not really sure what that means. Maybe it's a certain amount of time they have to read books. I don't really know. But it's okay. What I can do is just keep on rocking. So K represents Kristen books, and I know that Abby reads 8 more than that. So it's going to be K plus 8 should give me Abby. So now I'm going to solve. If Abby or Kristen read 9 books in the first marking period, I would plug a 9 in there. So over here, I know it was K plus 8 was my expression. So now it's going to be 9 plus 8, and that's going to equal 17. And so Kristen, I'm just going to use a K here, read 17 books in the first marking. That's a lot of books, so the marking must be a good amount of time. All right, so go ahead and try to fill out the next page's table as well.
Well, I hope this helped. I feel like this gets used all the time in real life when you're in marketing or when you're in sales and you're comparing and contrasting different items being sold, different stores selling things, trying to come up with how much of certain things you have in inventory and then how you can improve them. And we have to be able to use math as a language and use it to help us solve problems. And that's what this lesson's all about. So if you have any more questions or comments, again, leave them down below and keep rocking that math.
All of